when the human said, "You invaded our home." Galactic War Tribunal, Trial of Humanity, year 2741. The chamber was silent. The kind of silence that comes before a massacre. Thousands of alien representatives sat in the spiraling amphitheater of the Galactic Tribunal, their eye stalks, mandibles, and bioluminescent skin locked onto a single figure in the center. A human. He was bound in glowing restraint cuffs, his uniform torn, streaked with dried blood. Yet his posture remained unbowed, his steel-gray eyes burning with something the tribunal had not expected, contempt. From the highest seat, Supreme Arbiter Zelther, a being of cascading tendrils and crystalline plates, leaned forward. His voice rang out, deep and resonant. Humanity stands accused of reckless violence, war crimes, and the obliteration of the Zelner Advance Fleet. How do you plead? The human did not answer. He simply exhaled, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. Captain Doran Kane of Soul Defense, Zelther pressed, your species defied direct council orders. You did not surrender. You did not negotiate. You launched an extermination campaign against an empire 1,000 times your size. We demand an explanation. The human lifted his head, slowly, deliberately. The chamber held its breath. Then, in a voice that carried no hesitation, only a cold finality, he spoke. You invaded our home. A ripple of unease spread through the assembly. Some species recoiled instinctively, others flicked through their records as if searching for a mistranslation. Zelther narrowed his many eyes. We did no such thing. The Zelner simply performed a pacification strike to bring your planet under proper governance. Doran Kane laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Pacification strike? He echoed. You bombed our colonies. You butchered our people. You left our cities burning, and when we fought back, you called us monsters. His gaze swept the assembly, daring them to challenge him. No. You don't get to call it pacification. You invaded Earth and you expected us to roll over and die. Instead, we introduced you to war. First contact turned slaughter. 2 years earlier, the Zelner fleet arrived in the Sol system with 72 warships, planetary siege cannons, and an armada built to subjugate. Humanity, new to the galactic stage, was supposed to surrender like every other species before them. They did not. Instead, they fought like demons. The Zelner descended upon Mars first. Orbital defenses were vaporized in minutes, and surface forces met little resistance. The few settlements that existed were overrun, their occupants either executed or dragged away in containment fields. Then came the first mistake. The Zelner broadcast the footage. Humans across the Sol system watched their people being slaughtered in real time. They saw screaming children torn from their families, soldiers vaporized where they stood, settlements erased in nuclear fire. Earth did not panic. Earth did not beg. Earth prepared. The next time the Zelner fleet moved, they targeted Titan. But this time, when they landed, they didn't find helpless civilians. They found waiting trenches. Camouflaged railgun platforms. Orbital strike drones with tungsten rods locked onto every capital ship in the fleet. The humans didn't fight for territory. They fought to annihilate. Within 37 minutes, the entire Zelner invasion force on Titan was reduced to biological debris. The survivors who fled to orbit were given a single transmission. We are no longer taking prisoners. And then the humans turned their eyes to the stars. A war unlike any other. The tribunal chamber was in an uproar. Various species hissed, chittered, and spoke in frantic tones. Enough. Arbiter Zelther's voice boomed, forcing silence back into the chamber. His expression was unreadable, but a faint ripple of unease moved through his crystalline plates. You retaliated with excessive force. Humanity deployed weapons that have not been seen in millennia. You exterminated entire fleets. Doran Kane's eyes darkened. We didn't start the war. But we ended it. Zelther's tendrils quivered. You unleashed something horrific. Explain yourselves. The human's lips curled slightly, but it wasn't a smile. More like the baring of teeth. You came to our world with warships. You took from us, our people, our homes, our peace. You thought we were weak because we were new. But let me tell you something, Arbiter. He leaned forward, eyes boring into the alien leader. Humanity does not lose wars. We only delay victory. The chamber felt like it had lost oxygen. The Galactic Council had witnessed wars before. Civilizations crushed, empires collapsed. But never like this. Never with this sheer, methodical ruthlessness. They thought humans were just another species to be conquered. They were wrong. They had awoken something they could not contain. And now, as Captain Doran Kane stood before them, unbroken, unrepentant, they realized the terrifying truth. The humans were still holding back. And if pushed any further, they would show the galaxy what real war looked like. When the humans said, "You invaded our home," the silence in the tribunal chamber stretched, thick with something primal. Fear. Zelther's crystalline tendrils curled inward, a subconscious motion of unease. Around the chamber, other high-ranking officials flicked through holographic data, scanning reports from the war that should have been an easy conquest. But nothing about humanity had been easy. Zelther's voice, when he spoke, carried a note of tightly controlled authority. Your retaliation was excessive. The Zelner sought only to pacify. You responded with extinction. Doran Kane's expression did not change. You came to us with war, he said. We returned the favor. Zelther gestured, and a hovering hologram flickered to life. It displayed footage from the final days of the Zelner War, video taken from the last surviving Zelner battleship before its destruction. The chamber watched in tense silence as the recording played. The turning point, Battle of the Graveyard. Zelner warships burned in high orbit over Jupiter, their hulls cracked and venting atmosphere into the void. What had started as an unstoppable conquest had become a desperate slaughter. The Zelner, whose fleets had once dominated lesser civilizations, found themselves hunted. And Earth's forces showed no mercy. The footage showed human warships moving in coordinated attack patterns unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The sleek, midnight black ships of the Sol Defense Fleet wove through the wreckage of enemy vessels with terrifying precision, railgun rounds and missile swarms cutting through Zelner formations like a scalpel through flesh. The Zelner ships were massive, built for overwhelming firepower. But against humanity's tactics, against their sheer vicious ingenuity, size meant nothing. One Zelner dreadnought tried to retreat. A human warship, identified as the SDF Revenant, pursued, slipping between debris fields to evade enemy fire. Then the Revenant did something impossible. It did not fire weapons. It accelerated. The bridge of the Zelner dreadnought was chaos as alarms blared. Their weapons could not track the human ship in time. And then, impact. The Revenant had turned itself into a missile. The screen filled with fire as the human ship rammed straight through the dreadnought's bridge, carving a hole clean through the vessel before both ships detonated in a cataclysmic explosion. There was no retreat for the Zelner. Because humanity had decided they weren't fighting a war. They were ending one. A dangerous revelation. Back in the tribunal chamber, the footage stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the other counselors, a reptilian creature with dark, sunken eyes, spoke in a slow, careful tone. You mean to tell us that your soldiers were willing to sacrifice themselves? Kane's gaze did not waver. Every single one of them. Zelther's tendrils twitched again. The thought was incomprehensible. No species willingly threw their own lives away in such numbers. Even the most militaristic empires preserved their warriors, retreated when needed. But the humans? They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They simply fought until there was nothing left to fight. The Arbiter forced himself to maintain composure. Your actions are barbaric. No species fights like this. Kane tilted his head slightly. That's why you lost. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some counselors, the ones who had once supported humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Council, looked visibly shaken. Others, more militaristic species, regarded Kane with a new sense of wariness. Zelther's voice dropped lower, barely above a whisper. You fought like you had nothing to lose. Kane finally smiled, but it was a cold, predatory thing. That's because you took everything from us. And we wanted you to understand how that felt. The chamber shuddered with the weight of the truth. Humanity had not fought for survival. Humanity had fought for vengeance. And the war was not over yet. The tribunal chamber sat in frozen silence, the weight of Doran Kane's words still hanging in the air like the charged stillness before a supernova. Zelther, the Zelner Arbiter, clenched his tendrils together. He had spent centuries dictating the fates of civilizations, guiding empires like pieces on a galactic chessboard. Yet now, for the first time, he was afraid. Because he finally understood. Humanity had not fought for survival. They had fought to erase the ones who had wronged them. And they had succeeded. But the worst part? They weren't done. The fleet that shouldn't exist. Zelther forced himself to breathe steadily, then projected another hologram into the center of the chamber. A live feed from the outer rim. The entire tribunal gasped. On the screen, stretching across the void of space like an unnatural abyss, was a fleet. A human fleet. It should not have been possible. The war had already cost humanity everything. Their planet was scorched, their colonies shattered. Their losses should have been too great to recover from. And yet here they were. Hundreds, no thousands, of warships, all moving with perfect precision, their matte black hulls absorbing the starlight like predatory beasts. The largest among them dwarfed even the most formidable dreadnoughts of the Galactic Council's navy. But it wasn't just their numbers that sent terror rippling through the room. It was the way they moved. Like predators. Like executioners. Like something far, far worse than the Zellner had ever imagined. Zelther's voice faltered as he whispered, This isn't possible. Doran Kane exhaled slowly, his expression devoid of any remaining patience. You made us possible. The final mistake. The Galactic Council's admirals, seated in their respective booths, erupted into urgent debate. Some called for immediate peace talks. Others whispered of surrender. A few fools, still unwilling to grasp the gravity of the situation, demanded retaliation. One such fool, an avian admiral from the Carthari Dominion, slammed his clawed hand against the table. We will not bow to savages. We should. A sound cut him off. A warning. A deep, resonant hum vibrating through the chamber's very foundations. Every alien present turned in confusion, then horror, as the chamber's entire power grid flickered. The tribunal's defense systems, the very ones designed to protect the most powerful beings in the galaxy, shut down. Zelther's breath caught. What have you done? Kane finally stood. His voice was calm, steady, deadly. We are already inside your defenses. Zelther's tendrils curled in horror. Impossible. And yet, before he could react, the doors to the chamber burst open. A dozen human soldiers stepped inside, clad in exosuits that shimmered with advanced shielding. Their weapons, sleek and unrecognizable to even the most technologically advanced races, pulsed with quiet lethality. And leading them was a woman. She moved with the controlled grace of a predator. Her eyes, dark and cold, scanned the room like a goddess passing judgment. General Elise Carter. The slayer of Zellner. The tribunal froze, paralyzed between fight and flight. But both options were useless now. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to deliver a message. Carter's voice was calm as she stepped forward. The war is over. But not for us. She let the words sink in before continuing. You think that because we lost our home we lost our fight? That because you burned our world we would scatter like frightened animals? Her gaze swept over the room, meeting each alien's horrified stare. You fail to understand what you've created. She gestured to the hologram still displaying the human fleet outside. You didn't just make enemies. You made something worse. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You made humans with nothing left to lose. The chamber sat in paralyzed silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Because every species present knew one undeniable truth. There was only one force in the galaxy more dangerous than a desperate species fighting for survival. A species that had already survived, and was now looking for vengeance. Silence choked the tribunal chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of General Elise Carter's words hung in the air, suffocating. The Galactic Council had witnessed the impossible. Humanity should have been extinct. And yet, here they stood, stronger, more dangerous, and already inside the Council's defenses. Elise tilted her head slightly, watching the fear creep into the faces of the so-called rulers of the galaxy. She wanted them to feel this moment. Because this was not a negotiation. This was a reckoning. She activated a device on her wrist, and the hologram of the human fleet shifted. New images flickered into view, human warships bypassing planetary defenses, slipping through security grids, infiltrating key installations across the Council's most fortified worlds. Gasps filled the chamber. Admiral Rethak of the Carthari Dominion staggered back. That's impossible. How? Because you underestimated us, Elise interrupted, her voice quiet but edged with steel. Again. Her eyes locked onto Zelther, the Zellner arbiter, the one who had orchestrated humanity's downfall. The architect of Earth's ruin. He flinched under her gaze. The same being who had commanded armadas with ruthless precision now looked like a cornered animal. Elise took a step forward. You thought you could break us. You thought taking our home would end the war. But you only created something you never anticipated. She let the words settle before finishing. You created humans with nothing left to protect. Only something to destroy. No more games. A soft beep echoed through the chamber. Zelther's trembling tendrils activated his personal communicator, his 4 eyes darting wildly. Desperation. The screen flashed. A Zellner captain appeared, his face contorted in sheer panic. Arbiter. The human fleet, The feed cut out. Zelther's breath hitched. He tried again, reaching out to different fleets, different security forces. One by one the responses went dark. The tribunal leaders realized it at the same time. Their fleets were losing. Their forces were crumbling. A reptilian chancellor from the Zurithian clans shot to his feet. You're bluffing. If your kind had such power, you'd have used it already. Elise didn't blink. Instead, she gestured toward Kane. Duran Kane smiled. Who said we hadn't? The chamber doors slammed open. A Zellner guard stumbled inside, covered in blood. Not his own. His black and gold armor was drenched in the remains of his comrades. He fell to his knees, gasping. They're everywhere. They're not just soldiers there. Boom. The guard's body jerked once, a clean hole burned through his skull. He collapsed lifeless. Behind him, another human soldier stood, lowering his smoking weapon. The tribunal was no longer in control. The humans had already won. The verdict. Elise turned back to Zelther, stepping closer. The chamber felt smaller now. Like the universe itself was closing in. Your species burned our world to the ground. Her voice was devoid of anger now. No emotion at all. You slaughtered our people. You watched as we begged for mercy. She looked around the room. And the rest of you let it happen. No one spoke. No one could. Elise sighed, tilting her head slightly. Now I have to ask, why should we show you mercy? The tribunal leaders collapsed into chaos. Pleas erupted from every direction. Some begged for negotiations, others offered reparations. The Zurithians even proposed surrendering entire planets. Zelther tried to speak, but no sound came out. He knew. He had already seen what humans did when pushed too far. The unthinkable choice. The chamber's lights flickered. Outside, human warships waited. Elise took one slow breath before speaking again. You have one option. She turned her back on them, walking toward the doors. Every step deliberate. Every moment agonizing. She paused. One last chance. You will dismantle the council. Effective immediately. A stunned silence followed. Dismantle the council? Zelther found his voice, hoarse and trembling. You want to rule? Elise didn't turn around. No. She glanced at Kane, who smirked. We want you gone. The silence was deafening. No species had ever survived without the Galactic Council. The power structure had existed for millennia, guiding the rise and fall of empires. Without it, chaos would reign. Zelther tried to process it. What they were asking was worse than death. The tribunal would not be executed. They would not be imprisoned. They would be erased. Their influence, their legacy, their power, gone. And the humans would not take their place. They would let the galaxy burn itself down. The final order. Zelther slumped forward. It was over. He activated his communicator with shaking limbs. His voice barely a whisper. Stand down. Across the galaxy the order echoed. Ships powered down. Weapons deactivated. The war was done. Elise turned to the human soldiers standing by the doors. She gave them a single nod. Without a word they followed her out. No cheers. No celebrations. Just quiet, efficient departure. Because this wasn't victory. It was judgment. And humanity had delivered it in full. The legend of the reckoning. Long after the humans had left, the tribunal chamber remained in stunned silence. They were free to live. But no one would ever listen to them again. One by one, civilizations distanced themselves from the former council. The once mighty leaders of the galaxy became nothing more than relics of a failed empire. Meanwhile, humanity did not rebuild a new empire. They didn't need to. Because every species knew one thing now. They would never, ever risk angering humanity again. For they had seen what happened when humanity's polite mode turned off. And no one wanted to see what came next. The end.